BBC Radio Manchester, satellite weather with Diane Oxford.
Never going to be a fabulous day today. We've got a few spots of drizzly rain popping up here and there, and there is an awful lot of cloud cover. Now, the cloud cover will try and thin and break as the day goes on, but I'm not entirely sure it's going to be very successful. For most of us, it's grey, it's overcast, but it is mild. Top temperature is 20 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255. BBC Radio Manchester.
How do you? All right? Belting. So am I. Fine fettle and all that. Still think the weather's crap, but there you are. Only 'cause it is. Isn't it? Dreadful. We got to... Oh, I better give you the details. You must know these by now. You don't need me to tell you. Should we get her to tell you? We have that woman... Hang on, we'll get this woman to do the phone bit. Go on, Mrs...
Allan Beswick.
Yeah, we got
on the phone.
Do us the phone bit.
0161 228 2255.
There you are.
BBC Radio Manchester.
I haven't got one that does the email address, so I'll have to do that. And I'm not going to sing it. It's radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk. Nor do I have one that does the text. So again, it's me. 07786 206 951. That's it. That is the process. And then this snail mail, but I'm not going through all that. It is just too boring by far. But you know what it is. And if you don't, look it up. Ask somebody. Even ask me if you want. But yeah, towards the end of yesterday, as a result of a film being on television the evening before, now that will make it Monday evening, there was a film starring Timothy Spall, about Timothy Spall, yeah, him out of Auf Wiedersehen, the one with the motorbike in Auf Wiedersehen. Anyway, he played Albert Pierpoint, public hangman, and probably the best known public hangman in the UK, well, ever really. Yeah, so a film about him, very good film, and we ended up talking towards the end of yesterday about capital punishment, inevitably. And we got a few calls and emails and all that sort of stuff, and there's never time to do everything, so I'll just run through some of these. Joe in, I think he means Gorton, but he says Gotten. I hope there isn't a place called Gotten, because if there is and I don't know about it, then that's me in the doghouse. But anyway, Joe in wherever says, no executed murder has ever committed any more murders. All right, well, there are some things that you just can't argue with, aren't there? Really? Apparently, according to NH in Tameside, there are about 800 murder and manslaughter deaths in England and Wales annually. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't help much, because if we needed any statistic, it would be the statistic for the number of murders rather than the number of deaths by murder or manslaughter, because the capital punishment wouldn't apply to manslaughter. We got talking about whether any punishment was a deterrent, and Kevin says no punishment is a deterrent, we punish as a punishment. I don't see hanging as barbaric, if you mean by that cruel and uncivilised. I would bring up capital punishment this afternoon if it was put to the vote, in spite of your arguments. There is an alternative to the death penalty, a total life sentence behind bars. Unfortunately, we very rarely use it. Even Hindley had people trying for her early release. And that's Kevin. And my problem with that is that saying you are going to jail for life and you will never come out, I think is the same sentence in a way, although you're not dead. It's the same sentence and the same problem with the sentence that we have with capital punishment, and that is we own up, we acknowledge that there are people that we cannot change, that society cannot. We acknowledge that some people cannot get better. I don't mean better in terms of recovering from their condition. I mean better people. They can't become better people and more acceptable people, and I think everybody has to be given the opportunity to. I wouldn't release Ian Brady right now. I wouldn't. And I think it's unlikely that he'll ever reach a stage where he's fit for release. Myra Hindley, I could have listened to the arguments about whether Myra Hindley should have been released or not, whether she had altered from the person who committed those crimes into a person who was fit to live in our society once again. So I can I can see a progress in some people. Not at the moment in Ian Brady, but there you are. If you want to continue that conversation, you're more than welcome. You can talk about any subject under the sun on this lot, of course. 0161228 2255. Going to talk to Tommy in Macclesfield in a mo.
John Thompson, he knows what he means.
It's an interesting one, the old public school thing. You know, you hear that when people talk like that, and it really is that strong. It's sort of like the old BBC. Hello, this is the BBC, broadcasting from Alexander Palace. As a northerner, when I hear someone talk like that, I go, oh my God.
John Thompson, he knows what he means.
Do you know what's a dying thing at the seaside? They're thinking of getting rid. Punch and Judy.
I mean, what would you have if you made it PC?
I don't know, what would it be? There'd be to be a social worker puppet, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
They'd have to have a licence for the crocodile because it's an exotic species.
That's right.
John Thompson's take on the world.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Saturday from 11 on BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you, particularly if you're Tommy in Macclesfield. Hiya, Tommy.
Hi, Alan.
What have you got?
I just wanted to ask you advice here. I've got a letter from the National Grid to say that the gas meter has been identified in the property. It's coming to the end of its useful life, and that they're going to exchange it and give me a date and everything. Won't affect the current gas supply or anything like that. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah.
Right. So I just thought I'd check with you in case it was some kind of con or some kind of thing I should.
Well, having not seen the letter, I can't speak for yours, but that's fairly standard. Every so often, meters are replaced merely because they do get worn.
Yeah.
We've got moving parts, haven't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I just wanted to check on, because you hear these stories.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess that it was going to be bona fide because when I saw the bold print, there is no charge for this work. So I thought, well, if there's no charge for it, how are they going to rip me off? Are they?
It's going to be tricky, isn't it? I can't see how they're going to make a profit on that.
Yeah,
they change them from time to time. Otherwise, they'd be inaccurate.
Right. Well, thanks very much, Alan.
My pleasure.
It's a short one there. Thanks so much.
Glad to have been of service. 0161228 2255. We can't see the scam in it. We can't see the room for the scam in it. In fact, there is no scam in it. Yeah, they do. It's happened to me. Has it happened to you? Yeah, of course. Fairly standard. But he's right to check. There are all sorts of people up to no good these days, aren't they? Yeah. The thing that I thought he was going to ask was, will I have to take a day off work for this? That's the bit where it gets tricky, isn't it? They're going to replace your meter for free. You have to take a day off work. You're out of pocket by a long chalk in some cases. Anyway, there you are. Back to the emails. John in Lim, they say we're unable to see ourselves, and this might have been the problem with the gentleman whose son was shot with his air gun. This raises the question of how far should society go to protect people from themselves. We have a classic example of this in our local community. A man was cycling with his 9-year-old daughter on a local road, which has a steep incline, pinch points and blind bends. He watched as she fell off when approached by an oncoming car. From his point of view, this was the fault of the motorist, and he went as far as to have his picture on the front page of a local free paper with a supporting article. In the article, he says that his 9-year-old daughter regularly cycles on the roads to undertake shopping errands. With regard to this incident and the shooting, does any listener know what the age is when a child becomes able to exercise its faculties? For instance, at what age is a child aware of the consequences of what it's doing? At what age is a child capable of judging speed in distance? In fact, at what age is intelligence fully developed? Is there a paediatrician listening who can enlighten us? Well, the answer to your question is nobody knows, because it's different for everyone. First of all, there is no age at which a child becomes fully developed. Indeed, fully developed. We bury fully developed people because we are continually developing as individuals, and so we don't stop developing until we're dead. So you're not fully developed as an individual until you are dead, bizarrely. So, at what age does a child become able to judge speed and distance? A different age for everybody. There are 6,000 million different ages throughout the world that happens, and the same with everything else. Generally, it might be slightly different. There might be a norm that you're aware of, in which case, share it with us. Graham from Chapel-on-Firth. Hiya, Graham.
Yeah, hello, Alan. Good morning to you.
What can we do for you?
Well, it's something that you spoke about a few years ago concerning the repayment of a mortgage debt.
Oh, yes.
And I'm in the process of just clearing off an outstanding mortgage. and I got a completion figure from the local branch of the Building Society, and I sent the cheque off for that amount to the people concerned, and they've cashed the cheque and have written back acknowledging receipt of it, but they've pointed out that there's a shortfall of £225, and it's made up of title deeds, of a title deeds fee of £50 and the mortgage discharge fee of £175. Now, although those figures do appear on the statement I got from them at the end of last year, I seem to remember a few years ago you saying this was a con and it was just another way of the building societies trying to get money out of people like me. Is that correct?
It depends on your particular circumstances.
Right.
I maintain, and a number of lawyers have supported this view, that if you enter into an agreement with somebody...
Yes.
...that you will borrow money from them...
Yeah.
It is fairly obvious, and they take a security for that, it is fairly obvious from the outset that at some point that debt will be paid and they will have to return that which is taken in security, in your case the title deed of your property.
Yeah.
So that's that. So they should acknowledge and they should be prepared to deduct whatever costs are involved in that from their own revenue, not adding it to you at the end.
Right.
Unless they specify at the beginning. So it depends on your documentation.
So in other words, if we took the mortgage out 30 years ago, whatever it was, that was the time when they should have made us aware of these charges. Well,
made you aware, if they intended 30 years ago to charge you a sum of money to discharge your debt, providing you're not discharging it early, providing it is
it's gone its full term.
It's gone its full term. Providing that they have... If they've made provision for that charge in the agreement, I would say, and a number of lawyers have argued, that they're entitled to that because that's a contract you agreed to.
Yeah.
If they made no provision for it, I'm not altogether sure, and again, lawyers have made the point, that they have the right to charge it because they worked out, before they lent you the money, they worked out what it was going to cost them.
That's right.
And the fact that they failed to tell you of this charge at any point, and it's not in the contract, means they're not entitled to it. Now, if they have, A, included it in the original documents, or they've given you written notification in advance that there has been a change to the terms of the mortgage, at which point you would have been given the opportunity to say, no, I don't want that change, so I'm closing it now and I'll get a loan off somebody else, thank you very much. If they've never changed the terms, or they haven't retained the right to vary the terms without notice, or they didn't have it in at the beginning, I don't think they're entitled to it.
No, well, as I say, the charges do appear on the annual statement that you got from them saying how much was outstanding on the mortgage. And I suppose that was possibly the time to say, what's all this about?
Well, not necessarily. You need to go... have they been on that mortgage, the statement, the annual statement, every year since...
No.
When did it arrive?
About 3 or 4 years ago they put it on.
Right.
They started off, Alan, they wrote a letter to say that, and I'm assuming everybody got a copy of this letter.
Just tell me what yours was. Go on.
Pardon?
Yeah, just tell me yours.
Well, the letter was basically that they were instigating these charges as and from such and such a date, and since then it's appeared on the mortgage
statement. Now, what
statement.
did you do when you got that letter?
Nothing.
OK. It is probable, though I would have to see the document, and I might not understand it when I do. It is possible that they have, within the original documentation, retained the right to vary their charges. And if they have retained the right to vary their charges, all they have done is vary their charges.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
And there's nothing you can do about it. However, if they haven't retained the right to vary their charges, then the letter they wrote to you was a unilateral decision to vary their charges, and probably an illicit unilateral decision, because I can't say to you, give me £5 a week and I will do this, and then at some point just suddenly say, oh yeah, when you stop doing it, you've got to give me 200 quid. You can't do that.
No,
That's got to be in the contract. Or I've got to vary the agreement. Now, if I vary the agreement, I can't just write to you and say, I am varying the agreement. That's not valid. They've got to write to you, and you've got to agree to that variation. So it is possible, it is even probable that they have the right, but you need to read the original paperwork.
Well, yes, I think it's worth writing to them at the cost of a first-class stamp and saying, I'm not... prepared to pay these charges. Why do you think, you're entitled to claim them, and see what response it gets?
Absolutely so.
Yeah.
Absolutely so.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks very much, Alan.
0161228 2225. William in Bolton with you shortly. But right now it's just after 20 minutes past 12 o'clock on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines, Mark Edwardson.
Anti-terror police from Greater Manchester have been involved in the arrest of a fifth man in connection with a suspected threat to kill the Prime Minister. There's been a broad welcome for the decision by the health regulator NICE to allow the funding of a drug to treat the most common cause of blindness. And the actor and singer Darren Day has been banned from driving for 18 months after admitting driving under the influence. Manchester's weather, generally cloudy, highs of 20 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
If you're heading through the city centre of Manchester, Whitwood Street still closed both ways because of an accident and a spillage of fuel on the carriageway around Sackville Street after a bus and a car collided on the junction. On the motorways, generally fairly clear. It's a bit foggy over the M62 around junction 21 Mill Road, so do take care. And aside from that, generally a very quiet afternoon indeed. No major problems on the M6 through Cheshire up towards Orrell. So from around about junction 18 at Middlewich up to the Orrell interchange at junction 26. Now, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic. BBC Radio Manchester.
William in Bolton. Hi, William.
Hello, Alan. I'd be interested in your reaction and your listeners' reaction to what I've got to say regarding the story I heard on the radio this morning. I'd just like to say congratulations to the citizens of Oldham. They've done precisely what I predicted several times on this programme. They have taken upon themselves the responsibility to police their own neighbourhood. It's a responsibility that Greater Manchester Police Authority appear to have abnegated. They sound as if they are an embarrassment to the police authority. They've been taking hard-earned cash from honest working people in return for little or no service, and the people are doing it for themselves. And I think the people are sick and tired of being spoken to by politicians and police officers, such as the one on the radio this morning, who spoke of the situation in Oldham as not having been, I quote, risk assessed. And I think that's utter claptrap.
You tell me what you believe is happening in Oldham.
Well,
what they're doing, not what you think about it, but what the report said for your...
From what I can gather, they're going around the streets, they're sick and tired of having prostitutes and drug dealers, etc., in their neighbourhood, and they're trying to control what's going on.
Well, this is the more than 50 men involved in private patrols, as it were.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I'll read you the story, not for your benefit, William, but just so everybody else has got it. Families living in an area of Oldham which is suffering at the hands of drug dealers and prostitutes are patrolling the streets at night to try and get rid of them. More than 50 men are involved in patrols around Westwood and Coldhurst. They're offering the girls help to get off drugs, and they're telling the dealers they're not welcome. They're also naming and shaming their customers. Why do you think that's such a good idea?
Well, I think it helps the community. It makes it a safer place to be. It obviously appears to be something that they seem to think needs doing, which the police aren't doing.
What do you think is the next step of that?
What do you mean? What they should be doing?
Well, for example, one of the things that's happening is they are, and I quote, naming and shaming these curb crawlers, if you like, the customers.
Well, why not?
Well, why not indeed? However, what if, just a thought, what if somebody in that part of Oldham had a grudge against you and named and shamed you? How would you take that?
Well, I suppose I would be quite rightly miffed.
You'd be more than miffed, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You would think, what's going on here? Why am I being picked on? This is not a judicial process. This is just a lot of people taking the law into their own hands.
Yeah, but that's precisely what I said would happen, Alan.
Indeed, but I can take the point that you said it would happen. I think many of us have said it would happen, but you didn't just say it would happen. You congratulated on those who are doing it.
Well, yes, in a sense.
Well, no, you didn't quantify it. You simply said, I congratulate them. You didn't say... OK.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that it is up to ourselves in the end to be responsible for the kind of society which we have. And I think that, as I've said before, what the citizens of Greater Manchester want is not noddy-bobbies with degrees in sociology. We want properly trained, properly equipped, well-motivated, well-paid professionals to police our streets.
All right, well...
We don't want crackdowns and publicity walkabouts with politicians in the aftermath of a tragedy, or a stabbing, or an acid attack, Alan. We want the police to do the job that we're damn well paying them to do.
I fully appreciate that. What I'm having difficulty with is, well, first of all, the concept of a noddy-bobby having a sociology degree, frankly, leaves me cold. Sociology doesn't have much to offer to our society, and I suspect not many of the noddy-bobbies have got them anyway. They tend to be different people to that, but no matter. You're not happy with the noddy-bobbies. You wouldn't congratulate them, and yet you congratulate people with no training, no qualification, no powers, no uniform, no anything other than a desire to get out there and patrol. Interesting. You don't congratulate the noddy-bobbies because they're just not up to it in your view, and yet you congratulate the citizens.
Well, what I will say on behalf of the noddy-bobbies is that I do applaud them for the public spiritedness. In a sense, I also applaud the people, the complete civilians, as it were, who have taken it upon themselves to be responsible for their society as well.
So, if I summarised your view...
What I would like to say, perhaps, to sort of round it off is that the noddy-bobbies syndrome is a con job. It's an attempt to make it look as if we are being policed properly when we are not.
OK. Well, I think the summary of your view about those in Oldham is that they're making the best of a bad job. Will we go? OK. Let me offer to you, seeing as how we've just discussed the noddy-bobbies, there's a story knocking about today that the Home Secretary is going to give powers of on-the-spot fines and the like to people who are not community police patrol officers, nor are they police officers, but in fact are going to be the ordinary employees of local authorities, such as car park attendants, council staff, private security guards, for God's sake, and even dog wardens.
It's horrendously frightening. It's very frightening. Yesterday I stood outside the branch of my local bank waiting for someone, and a patrol car of some kind, not a police car, or not marked as such, some sort of private security company, parked up just in front of me with a handheld camera, or what appeared to be. He was sat inside the driver's seat, and he was waving it round this camera, and he happened to point it in my direction. Now, if I had done the same thing as a citizen, an ordinary Joe Bloggs walking up the street, I would probably, or likely to have been, pounced upon for either being a terrorist or a bank robber. And yet these private people, these private security companies, some of which, whose origin I think is quite dubious, politically wise, are able to do these kind of things, so-called on our behalf.
All right, William, good on you, mate. William predicted some time ago, as many of us did, that there would be, I'll use the word he didn't, and frankly nobody in Oldham used the word either, but there will be vigilante groups, there will be groups of dads, I think was the phrase William used and I used in the past. There'll be groups of dads who decide they've had enough and they get together and they patrol their own streets. Why? Because the police aren't doing it, and the people that the police have employed to do it are, in many people's eyes, a complete and utter waste of space. I refer, of course, to the aforementioned noddy-bobbies. Waste of time. Our new Chief Constable who's taken up office, Peter Fahey, former Chief Constable of Cheshire, declared when he was the Chief Constable of Cheshire that he was a great supporter of the community support officer. Whether that means we'll end up with even more of them in Manchester, I'm not in a position to say. The future will reveal all, I'm sure. But do you think that the people in Oldham who've decided that they will patrol the streets themselves are doing a good thing or a bad thing? William congratulates them. Do you? Gordon says perhaps the cops ought to be more in touch with their neighbourhoods, then this wouldn't happen. Of course, they are doing sensible policing. There are also legal implications on these people. I hope they're insured. Oh, and noddy bobbies do fairly well in their own backyards, as one of my neighbour does so with the local kids. Not really sure what he means by that, and probably feel best not pursuing it. To paraphrase the police inspector this morning, speaking on BBC Radio Manchester, he said that he had known of the problems in that area of Oldham for 2 years, but didn't realise that the residents were so concerned as to take such drastic action. He'd known for 2 years, says Kevin. Give them a chance. It takes them weeks to respond to a minor incident. How confident are you in the Greater Manchester Police? How confident are you in the Greater Manchester Police? Keith in Neston says, Alan, you use the phrase taking the law into their own hands. Whose laws are they, anyway? That's good, isn't it? That's good. They're all our laws. 0161 228 2255. If you've got something to say, that's fine. But I'm interested. How much confidence do you have in the local police? If a murder takes place in Greater Manchester, there is probably a high chance that it will be solved. Now, I know, yes, I'm with you. There are some very, should we say, almost celebrated cases that have not been solved yet, and probably never will. We know of those. But generally, major crimes are eventually solved. But what about the day-to-day? Do you think our streets are policed properly? Yeah, that's it. Do you get from the police that which you want? I've said before here that I don't think you and me, I mean, you must speak for yourself, but I don't think you and me are that bothered about the police having, I don't know, a great number of people involved in trying to lock up the drug dealers, trying to lock up the people who murder drug dealers, who are probably drug dealers themselves. But an awful lot of police resources goes on that. What we are bothered about is whether our streets are safe, whether our streets are safe to walk down in the daytime, at night. Now, I think our streets are safe. I walk down the streets as often as anybody else, and I don't feel threatened, I don't feel afraid, I feel perfectly confident. And I do know there are some people that don't have that confidence, but that might be related to their fears rather than related to the reality. Fear of crime is considerably greater than the chance of crime. But nonetheless, we're left with the question, do you think our police are doing a good job at the ordinary job of patrolling the streets? Some people in Oldham think they are not. Indeed, a load of dads have got together and said, stuff it, we'll do it ourselves. 0161 228 2255. Ken in Ratcliffe. Hiya, Ken.
Hello, Alan.
What have you got?
It's about this so-called barbaric method of hanging. I was absolutely disgusted yesterday listening to these people that were more concerned about the murderers, and especially that one who said wanted to sit on the fence. Well, I hope he gets a big splinter. Why is it we don't seem to take as much notice and have as many people about the victims? Nobody seems to be bothered about the victims. These people get murdered, they put in the ground 6 foot under, and these murderers, they live in the life of luxury in prison compared to those who are dead that have been murdered. Why don't we give more thought to the victims instead of worrying about these murderers that should be hung. And I reckon we should breed a few more peer points to hang these sods. I think it's disgusting that there seems the people that came on your show yesterday, the majority of the blimps, were upset about these murderers having a bad time. They'd have a bad time on the end of the rope, in my opinion.
You perhaps misunderstood what they were saying, Ken.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I more likely did. Seems they were more concerned about being barbaric to hang somebody than one of them who killed them two little blonde girls down Solemn, whatever you call the place. I mean, they're all concerned about him.
I don't think they are.
Oh, well, why don't we talk about the victims more so than these people
okay, Ken,
who are murderers?
Here's a simple question for you. A simple question.
Well, I should be able to manage that then.
Well, you and me both, mate. But here's the question. What difference will it make to the victim if we hang the killer?
Well, I don't think it'll make a lot unless they're not dead. But as far
well,
as
if they're not dead, the chances of having a killer are slim.
Well,
you have to be dead to have a killer.
Ken, well, I'm answering your question.
Well, here's the question again, just in case you forgot it, because you seem to be answering a different one and brought the victim back to life.
Yeah,
the question is, what difference will it make to the victim if the killer is hanged?
Well, obviously the only answer can be not one bit.
None.
Yeah.
So there's not much point thinking about the victim, for, frankly, there's nothing we can do for them on account of them being dead. So then we have to think, surely, about the rest of society, don't we?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. Now, you believe that hanging is a good thing, because it shows the rest of society that we will not tolerate murder, and those who take life will forfeit their life.
Correct.
Have I paraphrased your view?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, whether the process of dispatch, hanging, frankly, I think hanging is probably the least barbaric of the capital punishments, but believe it still to be barbaric, but it's the least barbaric. But you see, the reason I'm not cruel to dogs, now I think it's fairly well known amongst people who occasionally listen to this programme, they don't particularly like dogs.
I don't like dogs,
okay.
But go on.
But the reason I'm not cruel to dogs isn't because of the dog, it's because of me. I think being cruel is wrong, and so I try not to be cruel to dogs, to even squirrels. I dispatch in the least cruel way I can think of. I'm not cruel to birds, I'm not cruel to cats, I'm not cruel to humans if I can avoid it, because I think it is wrong to be cruel. Now, the people who were coming on yesterday were not saying that it wasn't fair on the killer, but that our society ought not to employ barbaric behaviour.
Well, doesn't that apply to the murderers? Don't they do a barbaric thing?
But we know they're wrong, but I'm not sure how saying to somebody, what you've done is wrong, so we're going to do something to you that is wrong. How does that take us any further forward?
Well, I think it takes us a lot further. I think myself that, as one guy said earlier on in the show, why should we have these people and getting them out of jail? Does a leopard change its spots?
You've gone back again. You've gone back to talking about the killer. I'm not talking about the killer.
Well, this is all you bring up.
Well,
you don't bring up about the victims, but what does
Ken,
it help one that's been murdered? How does it help them?
We've already established there's nothing we can do for the dead.
Well, that's it. You're bringing it back up, aren't you?
Well, Ken, I want you to consider the living. Can you manage?
Yep.
The living.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, do you want to be a member of a society that behaves in a barbaric way? That's a simple question.
No, I wouldn't.
Do you accept the practice itself? Ignore the killer. Do you think the practice of killing somebody at a date in the future is of itself horrible?
No.
You don't?
Talking about murderers, no, I don't.
You think it's a good idea?
I think it's fantastic.
That's fine. Now we understand. You see, you don't think hanging is barbaric.
No, I don't. Not for murderers.
OK, that's fine. Other people think it is, and they don't want to do it, not because they've got some kind of special relationship with killers who they think are wonderful and ought really to be social workers, but because they think the practice itself is horrid. That's what they're arguing against.
We'll be back at it again. What about the victims? Why don't we talk more about
Ken,
the victims? What
you dig
they're
one up,
entitled to and the parents.
You dig one up, and I'll have a conversation with them. It's just after 20 to 1 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines. Mark Edwardson.
A Salford woman fighting for the NHS to treat her kidney cancer with a drug suitant has taken a protest to London. A fifth man's been arrested by officers from Greater Manchester Police in connection with an alleged threat to kill the Prime Minister. And a council in Leicestershire is investigating a report that a computer containing the personal details of thousands of taxpayers was sold on an internet auction site. Manchester's weather, cloudy, a shower or two and a high of 20 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, if you're travelling on the M62, it's still very foggy on camera between junction 21 Milne Row and junction at 22 at Rishworth Moor, so please do take it carefully. It looks like it's queuing up as well on the M60 around junction 3 at Kingsway due to the roadworks just off the motorway on the A34. And let's take a look now to the situation in the city centre of Manchester on Whitworth Street, and it's still closed both ways because of an accident involving a car and a bus at the junction with Sackville Street. There's also a fuel spillage on the carriageway, so that will need to be cleaned at some point. I'm sure the road will be closed off for some time yet. Don't forget, if you can update me, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Good afternoon. So there's been no play before lunch for Lancashire on day one of their county championship match with Surrey at Blackpool. Lancs are, of course, away from Old Trafford because of the £600,000 drainage system that's being installed. There'll be a pitch inspection at Stanley Park shortly to see if we'll have any play today. Chris Malaband is there for us.
Not a ball bowled so far at Blackpool, and Stanley Park is looking a forlorn picture with drizzle still in the seaside air. Umpires Jeremy Lloyds and Nick Cook will inspect in 20 minutes' time, but the prognosis is looking far from positive. A total washout on day one appears inevitable, and if this does occur, it'll be the 7th full day of county championship cricket that Lancashire have lost to the weather this season. With Surrey without a win and propping up Division 1, it's doubly frustrating for Stuart Law's side.
Well, more from Chris, hopefully, throughout the afternoon here on BBC Radio Manchester. Meanwhile, Pakistan and Sussex leg spinner Mushtaq Ahmed is retired from county cricket. That's because of an ongoing knee injury. Mushtaq took 1,407 wickets in all competitions during his career. Well, Manchester City fly out to Denmark this morning ahead of tomorrow's UEFA Cup qualifying tie with FC Midtjylland. City have a 1-goal deficit from the first leg at Eastlands, but Blues boss Mark Hughes feels the away leg will be a different story.
It's not an easy game. I think the difference now is that we've had 2 really competitive Premier League games, and we hadn't had that leading into the last game against Midtjylland. So, yeah, they'll see a different team this Thursday.
Well, that game kicks off at 3:25 tomorrow. We'll have full commentary with Ian Cheeseman from 3 here on BBC Radio Manchester. Meanwhile, City defender Ryan McGivern has been included in Northern Ireland's 22-man squad for the World Cup qualifiers next month. The 18-year-old was sent off on his debut against Scotland last week. Some other football news this afternoon. Blackburn have signed Australian international Vince Grella from an undisclosed fee from Torino. Newcastle midfielder James Milner's handed in a transfer request at St James's Park, and Roman Pavlyuchenko is on the verge of a move to Tottenham. The Spartak Moscow striker is sorting out a visa. His arrival at White Hart Lane could speed up the sale of Dimitar Berbatov to Manchester United. And Kaka has denied newspaper reports linking him with an £80 million move to Chelsea. The AC Milan midfielder says he's staying at the San Siro. Ryan Giggs thinks Manchester United can go on to dominate European football with the potential that's in the current squad. Tomorrow the Reds find out their opposition in the group stages of this season's Champions League.
Hopefully it can get better, yeah. But the potential of this team is to go on and dominate football for the next 5-10 years. So I want to be part of that, obviously, at the start. So we've seen a glimpse of that last year. The test is now to go on and build on that.
Well, former Bury boss Chris Casper has admitted he doesn't want to get back into management for the near future at least. Casper, who's now youth coach at Bradford, was sacked by the Shakers back in January.
No. I think this is a good progression for myself to, I've had a look at the management one, and maybe, quite a few years down the line that if it happens again, it happens again. But I enjoy my coaching, and, for the good foreseeable future anyway, hopefully, it's going to be part of my future.
Well, one of Greater Manchester's Olympic medalists says there's no certainty she'll be part of Team GB at London in 2012. Stockport swimmer Kerry-Anne Payne won silver in the 10-kilometre open water swim and says she's now focusing on getting gold in London.
Things can change, anything can happen in 4 years, and we've got a great youth scheme coming up for all the youngsters that, hopefully want to be in 2012 as well. So, our place is never sort of set in stone until we kind of get there.
Well, Britain's Olympic boxing champion James DeGale says he'll take the next few weeks to consider his future. The middleweight success has resulted in him being made a number of lucrative offers to turn professional, but the London boxer says the prospect of defending his title at the 2012 Games is a big attraction. Colin Montgomery says Ian Poulter's decision not to play in the Johnny Walker Classic has caused surprise among his fellow golfers on the European Tour. Poulter now needs a wildcard invite from captain Nick Faldo to make Europe's Ryder Cup team.
It's the talk of the range that why he's suddenly pulled out of here if he knew that he had to play 15 tournaments in America. The question now is, well, why did he enter it and then have to pull out, knowing he had to play 15 anyway in America? So that was a strange one. It'll all be revealed, I suppose, as to his decision, if it was a wise one or not, on Sunday evening.
Well, finally for now, in tonight's Speedway, Bellevue Aces are at home against Wolverhampton.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
Well, there was a shock at the Reebok in the Carling Cup for Bolton last night. Macclesfield are going giant hunting this evening. The Silkmen take on West Ham at Upton Park. Live updates tonight from 7:45.
Yeah, very good day to you. How are you?
BBC Radio Manchester.
That was nice, wasn't it? George in Stockport says he's not surprised that people don't have confidence in the police. He claims he was sexually assaulted while in a hospital. He began an official complaint, going through the procedure, before going to the police. He then got fed up and went to the police, but the police wouldn't look at the case until the internal thing, the official complaints procedure, had been completed. It took them, would you believe, 5 months to interview the alleged perpetrators, and it was then thrown out through lack of evidence. That really would concentrate your mind, wouldn't it? That would. 0161 228 2255. If you've something to say, that's fine. Gordon says, Alan, you may not be able to do anything for the dead person, but you can stop the reoffending for sure, and therefore another dead person. Is this statement true or not? Well, yes, it is. Completely true. If you kill someone, there's a fair chance they won't go on to kill again or for the first time. Don't kill them, just bang them up for life, he says, and make sure that it means life. Well, again, I have a problem with the concept of making sure it means life, because I think we as a society have to believe that we're good enough to repatriate, if you like, anybody. Raymond in Rossendale, why don't they put out to worldwide tender all sentences over 5 years? Cheapest place, regardless of where it is. It'd save us a fortune. Paul in Salford. Hiya, Paul.
Hello.
What can we do for you?
It's probably three things. First of all, vigilantism.
Yeah.
Vigilantism's okay, providing it's controlled and disciplined. I'm not too bothered about who brings my wallet back that's just been stolen, whether it's a police officer or a vigilante, as long as I get it back. There's adequate powers under Section 24 PACE to arrest. Secondly, hanging. Too much of a danger of hanging an innocent person. History has proved we've got it wrong time and time again. Birmingham 6, Guildford 4, Timothy Evans, the list goes on. And last thing, heroes, Victoria Cross winners. I've just been to visit a grave at Phillips Park Cemetery in Manchester. One of the heroes from the Zulu Wars campaign. The grave The grass is overgrown. It's a mess. The guy's a hero. We should be doing more for people like that. Maybe the War Graves Commission should be looking into it. The guy was a hero, albeit 1879, January 23rd, but he's a forgotten hero, isn't he? That's it, basically, mate.
Okay, vigilantianism... I can't even say it, you're better than me. Vigilantianism, it's an interesting concept, controlled vigilantes.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'd get there. Hanging not safe, well, no judicial process is safe. I'm intrigued by the VC winners. They say 1879.
Yeah, the Rockstriff campaign, the defence of the Rockstriff. You know the film Zulu?
Yeah, I'm aware of Rockstriff and Zulu, thank you. But 1879 won the VC.
He was actually awarded the VC in 1880 by Queen Victoria.
But I just think, well, it was a long time ago. It was over a century ago. And if we're gonna do anything, surely we ought eventually to forget the dead, oughtn't we?
That's the easy way out, isn't it? I mean,
I don't know about easy. I think it's the inevitable way out, isn't it?
Do you think so?
Well, I think it is. Yeah,
we have these ceremonies every year, and it's to commemorate and remember people who lost their lives in wars.
We
I'm
do.
not in favour of wars, but we should remember them.
Not many are, but yes, we do have Remembrance Day and Remembrance Sunday, and it's probably right and proper that we remind ourselves at that time of the ordinary people like the bloke next door to you and the bloke next door to me and the like. The ordinary people who've had their lives taken from them before their time by conflict. And I suppose we have to consider those who did things above and beyond the call of that particular duty at that time. But
well, I can tell you now, a very good friend of mine who was killed by a sniper in Strabane in 1974. The guy was actually stood right next to me on foot patrol as a soldier. I visit his grave on a regular basis and put flowers there, you know.
But that's fair, and that's right and proper, because you have a connection, and our modern society has a connection. But in 150 years' time, it's probably right that he's forgotten. Maybe his family. I mean, do you put flowers on the grave of your? I don't know how many words of great I've got to use, but on your ancestors of 1880.
If he was a VC winner,
I'm just asking, would you put flowers on your own relative's grave of all that time?
If I knew where they were buried, yeah.
You would? Well,
of course, yeah.
I mean, that's a level of, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but
no.
That's a level of sentimentality that is above the norm. I mean, it was 120 years ago. I think that's 5 generations.
Yeah, well, I can see where you're coming from, Alan, but I still think they should keep his grave tidy, keep the grass cut, and put little monuments up there, you know, because the Victoria Cross is the highest award, as you know, that can be awarded to any soldier on active service.
Quite so. But well, okay, that's fine. That's fine. I tend to go the other way, really, and think time's moved on. I mean, just imagine in another 100 years' time, when it's 250 years. And once you start to honour that grave, that piece of land, once you start to do that, you've then got it forever. And you end up, stupidly, it won't affect you and me by any means, but in 1,000 years, people are still honouring it. And I think, for why? What we need to do is gather them all together. I don't mean move their graves, but gather them all together and remember them all. And we do that on Remembrance Sunday.
Yeah, just one thing, though. This guy's actually buried in a pauper's grave. He was buried there in April 1913 with probably a dozen other people in there. He actually died a pauper in Bridge Street Mission, Manchester. He died an alcoholic, and he was not recognised as a hero, but just a down and out. And he was tragically buried in a pauper's grave, you know.
It's a sad story, without a doubt, and perhaps in our modern enlightened time it wouldn't happen, but I've got a terrible feeling that it would. Good to talk to you, Paul. Cheers, mate.
Thank you.
0161 228 2255. Dave, calling from Thailand, says, when you give evidence in court, you swear on the Bible. And in the Bible it says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, that, of course, is the Old Testament where it says that. The New Testament actually tells us to turn the other cheek. So it depends which bit of the Bible you want to go by. And, of course, not everybody giving evidence in court swears on the Bible. I, for one, wouldn't, because it's just another novel for me. It'd be like swearing on the famous Five for me to do it, or, I don't know, the Tale of Two Cities for me to swear on the Bible. It has the same value. But others attest and others swear on other holy books, because there's an awful lot of them about.
This is the Northwest's biggest sports station.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Manchester United.
Manchester United are champions of Europe for the third time. Boy, do they deserve it.
Just 3 months after the drama in Moscow, Manchester United are out to lay their hands on yet more European silverware.
We'll view the Super Cup as one you win it, but it's still giving you a lot of experience to play in a game of that nature.
United are in Monaco for the UEFA Super Cup against Zenit St Petersburg, and so are we.
The all-new Manchester Sports. Friday evening from 7.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. Roger in Timperley. Hi, Roger.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Yeah, just a quick thought. I seem to recall the death penalty is still in force for something like treason or something of a military nature.
No, it was until comparatively recently still in force for treason and arson in Her Majesty's dockyards. But that was never rescinded by our own government, as it were. But when our government signed up to be part of the European Treaty of Human Rights, when we became a signatory to that, we forsook the right to practice capital punishment. So it was by deciding to join with the rest of Europe on a human rights treaty, we had to agree that we would not put anyone to death by the state, as it were.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Splendid. There we are. So we got that one cleared up. That's fairly straightforward. But it did. When capital punishment was, we all say when it was outlawed, when it was done away with, but of course it wasn't abandoned entirely. Nobody was hanged after the overturning of capital punishment in the 60s, the late 60s. After that was done away with, it did actually still exist. It was, as Roger says, still on the statute books. You could be put to death for the capital offences of arson in Her Majesty's dockyard and treason, and they were never rescinded. However, they were, if you like, overtaken by events when the government signed up to the European Treaty of Human Rights. Dimpner in Manchester says, you get good Christians and good non-Christians too. As well as an eye for an eye, the 10 Commandments say, thou shalt not kill. Indeed, the very essence of two faiths there, isn't it? Judaism and Christianity in all its guises. It starts with, thou shalt not kill. Doesn't the Bible also say, somewhere along the line, I can't quite remember where it said, but doesn't it also say, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord? David says, Alan, from Thursday, 30 million... How do we achieve it easy? I don't understand. How do we achieve it easy? Jews, gypsies, anybody over 60, do like Hitler did. I would be on my way, but there you go. I think you're talking about 30 million people who were put to death by the state because the state thought they had lost the right to live. I think that's what you're saying, but in one sentence like that, it doesn't quite tell me. But if you want to add to it, feel free. I'm here, ready, willing, and some say able, but frankly, not many. Who can blame them?
Long-distance relationships. Do they really stand a chance, or are they doomed? Tonight, from 10, with me, Matt White.
Well, I've no idea. Oh, I'm trying to think about that now. Probably not. 0161 228 2255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk, and the text number 07786 206 951.
95.1 FM,
DAB Digital Radio,
and the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, Salford woman's battle for a cancer drug goes to London. And the Tories are very clear. If you're fat, it's your fault.
And Lancashire are awaiting a pitch inspection in the County Championship at Blackpool.
Well, it's a grey old afternoon ahead of us. Lots of cloud around, maybe the odd spot of drizzle, but it feels mild with top temperatures of 20 Celsius.
And 2 lanes are closed on the M56 towards Manchester because of an accident and a spillage of oil on the carriageway just after junction 4 at Withenshaw. The inside and middle lanes closed off, with congestion tailing back to 6 at the Hale Four Seasons roundabout.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Edwardson. A Salford woman fighting for the NHS to treat her kidney cancer with the drug Sutent has taken a protest to London. Jean Murphy was denied the treatment by Salford PCT on the grounds that it wasn't cost-effective, but in the end she got hold of it thanks to an anonymous donation. Today, Jean and her family are meeting up with other cancer sufferers and handing in letters of protest to the health regulator, NICE, and she insists she won't give up.
I'm hoping that they'll come to the common sense, and just fund the drugs, because this isn't going to go away, and I've always said I will do it and do it and do it till I drop. They will not get away with it with me. I'm going to be the thorn in their side.
Meanwhile, the head of NICE has apologised for the length of time it took to reach a decision about a drug which helps save people's sight. A new ruling means patients in England who have wet, age-related macular degeneration, a common cause of blindness, will now be able to get the drug Lucentis. Detectives have detained a 5th man in connection with a suspected plot to kill the Prime Minister. Police are understood to have begun their investigation after a threat was posted on an extremist website earlier this year. More details from Arif Ansari.
The 29-year-old man was arrested in Derby yesterday under the Terrorism Act in a joint operation by the Greater Manchester Police Counter-Terrorism Unit and Lancashire Constabulary. Forensic scientists are searching his home. Detectives say the search could take several days. 5 men are now in custody. 3 were arrested a fortnight ago at Manchester Airport and in Accrington in Lancashire. A 4th man was detained in Blackburn yesterday.
The Foreign Secretary David Miliband's arrived in Ukraine for a meeting with the country's president and prime minister. The talks will be dominated by how to respond to Russia's decision yesterday to recognise 2 breakaway regions of Georgia as independent states. The Conservatives are calling for overweight people to take responsibility for their own lifestyles by exercising and eating healthily. The Shadow Health Secretary, Andrew Lansley, thinks current government policies allowing people to blame biological or environmental factors for their obesity. He said there should be no excuse for people being too fat.
There is nothing inevitable about any of this. If we make it so that children get better diet, we've got more access to physical activity, we've got better reformulation of food so that people can eat better, we can change all these things. People have got to realise that together with government and business, we've got to change this thing, but we have to do it in a way that is non-bureaucratic and without nannying.
Police in Warrington are hunting 2 robbers who forced their way into a flat in the Hilden Road area of Padgate on Sunday, threatening the 60-year-old occupant with kitchen knives before stealing several personal belongings. The men escaped in a blue transit van. And a 77-year-old man was rescued from his burning flat in Littleborough yesterday by a police officer who saw smoke coming through the window. Officers broke down the door to find the disabled man trapped in the kitchen. He was taken to Rochdale Infirmary and treated for minor burns and breathing in smoke. Now, we've heard of the boxing greats, Cooper, Bruno and Hatton, but what about Jock McAvoy? Otherwise known as the Rochdale Thunderbolts, he was the British and Empire boxing champion in the 1930s and narrowly missed out on the world light heavyweight title. There's now a campaign to get a memorial to him erected at Hollingworth Lake, and his biographer, Brian Hughes, explains why he deserves it.
Times have changed and these new stars come along, and no disrespect to any of them, they wasn't fit, you know, in a boxing sense to tie Jock McAvoy's boots. He's got a record that nobody, even today or in the future, will ever beat. He scored 91 knockouts in his fights. Nobody has beaten that since.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Well, there was no play before lunch at Blackpool on day one of Lancashire's County Championship match with Surrey. A pitch inspection has just taken place, and it's not good news, Chris Malaband.
Sadly not. No play abandoned for the day on day one at Blackpool. Stanley Park looking a forlorn picture with drizzle still falling in the air, and umpires Jeremy Lloyds and Nick Cook didn't hang around long before curtailing play for the day. Not a ball bowled, so we'll come back tomorrow and try again.
Meanwhile, Pakistan and Sussex leg spinner Mushtaq Ahmed has retired from county cricket because of an ongoing knee injury. Mushtaq took 598 wickets, bowling more than 26,000 overs. Manchester City defender Ryan McGivern has been included in Northern Ireland's 22-man squad for the World Cup qualifiers next month. The 18-year-old was sent off on his debut against Scotland last week. Some transfer news this afternoon. Blackburn have signed Australian international Vince Grella from Torino. Newcastle midfielder James Milner has handed in a transfer request at St James's Park, and Roman Pavlyuchenko is on the verge of joining Tottenham. The Spartak Moscow striker is sorting out his visa. The Carling Cup second round continues this evening. Macclesfield take on West Ham at Upton Park. You can hear live reports right here on BBC Radio Manchester from 7:45. And in tonight's Speedway, Bellevue Aces host Wolverhampton.
BBC Radio Manchester satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, this afternoon it's a cloudy picture. It's a grey old day, that is for sure, and that cloud will stick with us right the way through the afternoon. Very little prospect of any brightness or sunshine. There is just the chance that we could see a little bit of patchy drizzle here and there, but it's more likely just to be a dry, cloudy afternoon. It doesn't feel cold though. Top temperatures 20 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. How are you? Alan, with regards to the issues in Oldham, it is absolutely fantastic what they are doing. The police should hang their heads in shame along with the Race Relations Community Relations Agency. The people who are doing this are of Asian descent and are an example to us all. We should all be doing this in our communities. The trouble with some parts of the community is that they're made up of dysfunctional white families who are fatherless and aspirationless. Well done them, says Lewis in Bolton. Well, what do you say? 0161 228 2255, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And, of course, you can text on 07786 206 951. Still with text, Ian in Northwich. From time to time, our police community PCSO, I've forgotten what that stands for, service officer? So... not even sure that's the right name for him. Never mind, we all know what you mean, the noddy bobby. From time to time, our PCSO has made all the difference by dramatically reducing youth nuisance in our village. She's done so much good, much, much more than our last police officer, who you hardly saw. Please think twice before you make negative comments about PCSOs. That's Ian in Northwich. Glad to see yours is working. I think I occasionally see the ones knocking about Lee and Atherton, and frankly, they seem to be doing fine. It's just that they're not coppers, and I want coppers. Joe from Wigan. Back to the Bible, says Joe. The Bible actually says the punishment shall be no more than an eye for an eye, or a tooth for a tooth. The quotation is usually an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's frequently waved as what you might call a biblical banner in favour of capital punishment, but Joe says they ought to include the whole sentence. The punishment shall be no more than an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. So you don't punish vindictively, I guess. Ted in Moston. Yet again, Alan, you prove yourself to be a wet liberal. Thank you. That's the nicest thing people say to me. You're nothing but a stinking wet liberal. And I get a warm glow. Anyway, thanks for that. But Ted says you prove yourself to be a wet liberal with no sense of reality. There are people in this country who should have been hanged. Jerry Adams is one. If our society is better than murderers like him, then we would exterminate them. Ted in Moston. Yeah, but then you have to go back to the idea, once we decide that we're better than somebody else and can therefore take their life, you end up not far down the road with Adolf Hitler saying to the German people, look, these Jews, they're horrible. These gypsies with their horrible behaviour, living in caravans, and the Jews taking all our money, wearing fur coats, and look at the shape of their noses. Let's get them all dead. And you just think, well, they're less than us, so it doesn't really matter. They're just vermin. It's just like exterminating animals. So get on with it. Get the ovens ready. That's the next step. I'm sorry, but once you start the journey, you have to look at where you might end up.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxbury.
Eamon and Diane.
Let's do the things in life that we want to do. Let's get this plan working, because the guy who wrote the 100 things to do before you die has now gone and died without having done them all.
Eamon and Diane, and you.
Most of the things that people will suggest you've already done. You've been very lucky.
I have done the big bungee jump off the bridge in New Zealand. So I would like
Have you flown over the Grand Canyon in a helicopter?
I am not an environmental terrorist, but I have walked down the Grand Canyon.
Have you seen a grown man cry?
3 of us in a two-man tent.
The station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
It is quite terrifying.
Back tomorrow morning from 6 at BBC Radio Manchester.
Colin in Bolton says via text. Oh, by the way, PCSO, Police Community Support Officer. Thank you, Ewan. Ewan's producing today, and he knows a thing or two, and that's one of them. What the other thing is he knows, we're still trying to find out. Anyway, Colin in Bolton via text says, loosely relating to the issue of capital punishment, recently I watched a television drama about Henry VIII and noticed that his moral and religious priorities were very unusual compared with those that we would adopt in British society today. I was surprised to learn, says Colin, that he would struggle with his conscience and worry about being in God's favour, about the validity of the divorce of one of his wives. Simultaneously, he would order and sanction people's executions, including 1 or 2 of his own wives. Such an undertaking would be carried out with such ease for offences that would be regarded by us in society today to be trivial. A king who commissions executions cannot seriously believe that he has an affinity with God in view of the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Well, one can believe what one wishes in the end, and we all manipulate our emotions ourselves in order to believe something, don't we? We all do that. Keith in Blackpool. Hi, Alan. I don't agree with graves and gravestones. I don't want anything or any place left behind for anyone to visit. I don't mind others having the option, though. If anyone wants to think of me, fondly or not, they can do it anywhere, preferably over a glass of dark rum, says Keith. Ex-sailor, you see. Actually, I'm trying to find someone who assembles fireworks. I'd like the ashes fired up in a sparkling rocket and spread around. Better still, if a little parachute then floats to Earth with one of those laughing clowns screeching away. Unfortunately, the family don't agree, so it may not happen. But so what? What's that? Did you get on your bike through the lights last night? Oh, no, was it Blackpool lights last night? No. I try to avoid those. I think seeing the Blackpool lights is a treat that I will risk once every decade or so. And frankly, notice very little difference. They're much the same, but good on them. Alan, when we go, it's not just... Oh, dear. Right, I can't read the rest of that. David, your email has gone jumbly. When we go, it's not just what time. Fine, thank you for that. I'm sure it made sense when you sent it, but something's gone awry, and I can't even make words out the letters. Completely gone. Sorry about that. Anonymous via text says, Alan, I'm a former prison officer. I served at Risley, and one time we had 12 double and 2 triple murderers housed there. And? I mean, if you mean by double murderer a person who killed 2 people at the same time, or do you mean a person who killed 1 person, did what is called a life sentence, came out and killed another? And the same with the triple. Do you mean that they went in, came out, did a murder, came in, went out, did another murder, went in, came out, did another murder, went in and out, and the only time they come out is when they're killing? Well, I don't know what to say to that, because I don't quite know what point you're making. Yes, it is the case. There's no escaping. It is the case that if we ever release people who have committed a murder in their past and are serving a sentence for that, if we ever release them, there will always be a risk involved in that. We can't avoid it. That's the reality of life. But that's the risk of being in society, isn't it? The risk of trying to do good and the right thing means that sometimes it will go awry. But does that mean we should cease to strive to do the right thing? I would hope not. Kevin, if we are to remember and respect heroes, should we remember them all? What about the German conscript and his widow? Shouldn't they be remembered? Well, yes, they should, Kevin. Yes, they should. And I was in Crete many years ago, a long time ago. I was in Crete on holiday. And the Battle of Crete was a huge battle. Huge battle. And there is quite a large Commonwealth War Grave cemetery in the vicinity. But up on the hill, there's also an Axis, if you will, War Grave cemetery. A German War Grave cemetery. And I went up there to have a look. I had a look round the Allied one. And then I climbed the hill and had a look round the German one. And the number of German signatories in the book was about equal to the non-German, including many Brits. Many Brits. So, yes, if we're going to remember heroes, if we're going to remember the war dead, then we should remember the war dead on both sides, be they German, Afghani, Iraqi, a variety of Africans, any of them. We should remember them all. What we should remember most of all is that every last one of them is dead because the politicians failed. That's why people die in war. They don't die in war because they're heroes. They don't die in war because they're inadequates. They die in war because the politicians made mistakes. That's it. That is it. Eddie in Stockport, hiya.
Hello, Alan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I want to talk about capital punishment.
Go ahead.
I am an advocate. I totally agree with it, and I'll give him the reasons why.
Please do.
Well, everything that's wrong with this country, in my opinion, is a lack of discipline and a lack of deterrence. This is why we let people off for this, that and the other, and they just carry on, these kids with knives, etc., etc. There is no deterrence, and the same with murderers. I'm in my 80s now. When I was a kid, if there was a murder, it was one murder, it was absolute full front page news forever. But let me give my reasons. Capital punishment, the only thing against it, in my opinion, is that sometimes they do hang an innocent man. Totally and totally wrong, but that's it. And I believe it's no different. I was conscripted for the army with hundreds of thousands of others. I could have been killed. I didn't want to go in the army. I was conscripted. I was totally innocent. Fortunately, I wasn't killed. Many of my comrades were. What is the difference? Innocent men die. To finish it, the prisons are full of murderers. No wonder we can't put other people in. I was brought up I was taught, if you do wrong, you are punished. If you do right, you are rewarded. I brought my children up the same way as I was brought up, and they're a credit to me. Always good-mannered. You don't get those things now today. I think that's about it.
I'm afraid the only way we can discourse your view is by introducing stories, if you like. Your kids were brought up, they do credit to you, they were brought up properly, they know the difference between right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly one of them could, in the most unlikely of circumstances, be charged with murder.
Mm-hmm.
In the system you've just outlined, they could be found guilty.
Mm-hmm.
In the system you desire, they would be hanged.
Mm-hmm.
And you would say, it's the luck of the draw. Sad luck. It's luck of the draw.
No, I wouldn't say it was the luck of the draw. Not the luck of the draw.
What would you say then?
You said they did murder somebody, did you?
No, I didn't. I said they would be charged with murder and found guilty.
Yes.
What I'm offering to you is the thought that the trouble with the idea that if people are wrongfully hanged, and you acknowledge that they are, and would be again if we reintroduced it, it's unfortunate, but people die in war and they're conscripted, and so I took that to mean that it's just the luck of the draw. It's the luck of the draw that you're alive and some of your former military colleagues are dead.
Yeah.
It's the luck of the draw. So if your child was charged with murder and put to death because he or she was found guilty, you would do what? Would you say, my child is not the child I thought he or she was, but a wicked person, or a victim of the state, and I must bear that with fortitude because it's the luck of the draw?
Well, that would depend on whether I thought he was guilty or not. If I thought he was guilty, I would go along with it.
If he was found guilty, would that address whether you thought he was guilty or not?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
But I wouldn't do anything about it. I'd do my best to try and prove he was innocent. But that's it.
But you're prepared. You are prepared to forfeit one of your children for the higher theory.
Well, it's not so much a theory. It's, in my opinion,
a higher belief.
It's the
a better world.
Call it that if you like. Yeah.
You're prepared to forfeit one of your children for a better world.
Yeah.
You have good children. Others will decide whether that's a good parent. Good on, you ready? 0161 228 2255. Just after 1:20 on BBC Radio Manchester. News headlines. Alexia O'Connor.
A Salford woman's taken her fight to get the cancer drug Sutent on the NHS to London. If you're fat, it's your fault. That's according to the Conservatives, who are calling for overweight people to take responsibility for their own lifestyles by exercising and eating healthily. And a 77-year-old disabled man was rescued from his burning flat in Littleborough yesterday by a police officer who saw smoke coming from the window. Manchester's weather, cloudy, some showers and a top temperature today of 20 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, traffic at the moment still slowing down on the eastbound carriageway between junction 21 at Rishworth Moor through towards junction 22. There's a lot of fog around that part of the Pennine, so please do take it carefully. Visibility is greatly reduced. Now to the M56, and it's still queuing up because of a lane closure just after junction 4 at Wythenshawe, with congestion all the way back to the Hale Four Seasons roundabout. Two vehicles collided on the inside lane of the 4, so that lane's been closed to traffic for the moment. And it's queuing up on the M60 around the exit slip to the A34 at junction 3 Kingsway because of roadworks just off the motorway network. Don't forget though, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
2020 traffic means you get an update every 20 minutes through the day.
I was taken to task earlier by a chap from Northwich because their CPSO, their Community Police Support Officer, was a cracker, did a really good job, and we congratulate him. And then I heard that story in the news about a police officer who saw smoke coming from the window of a house and saved somebody's life in a fire. And it got me thinking, it does from time to time, and I've had a cracking money-saving idea. At the moment, I believe we have the best fire service in the world. Not just Greater Manchester, I mean generally in the United Kingdom. Our firefighters are superb. People come from all over the world to learn the methods used by our firefighters. I think they are the best, and they do our community proud. And I always, always take my hat off to them. They do a fantastic job. Now, having said that, they don't come cheap. I'm sorry, that's the reality. A firefighting engine, one of them big red things with the wheels and the ladders all over the place, they cost a bloody fortune, an absolute fortune. Firefighters, the personnel themselves, they're always training. Again, they cost a fortune. They don't make a shed load of money. Fortunately, many of them have got about 11 different jobs, so that's all right. But they don't make a lot of money, but they're not poor. They're not poor. They're not. Don't let anyone tell you any different. They're not poor. You go and have a look at the car park at the fire station. It's not full of bikes and clapped out old bangers. They're reasonably well paid for the work they do, which is mainly training. Just every so often they have to run into a burning building. I take my hat off to them. But we could save ourselves a fortune, like we do with the police. We've realised that the police are very, very expensive, what with their flash cars and their uniforms and their training and their shift patterns and all the rest. They cost a bloody fortune. So what we've done is we've introduced community support officers, CSOs, noddy bobbies, untrained individuals, put them in a hat and a uniform with shiny buttons, a yellow "please don't run me over" jacket, and we have them wandering about the street, wondering what the bloody hell to do to fill the day. Well, why don't we do away with, say, half of the firefighters? Make them redundant. Make half of our firefighters redundant. Get rid of half the fire engines. Close down half the fire stations. Yes, I know that would put us at risk, but I've got the solution. We introduce community firefighters. What we have is we get them a ladder from B&Q and a plastic bucket and some water, and we have them wandering about the streets with their little ladder and their bucket of water, and in the event of seeing a fire, they run over and they throw the bucket of water over it and they climb up the ladder and shout, "Come on out, it's burning!" It's the answer. It's worked for the... We do away with the ambulance service. We don't want those paramedics flying about all over the place. We don't need that. What we need is a bloke wandering round with a pocket full of bandages. Just have a wander around. He's got a shiny suit on. Well, or a suit with shiny buttons. It's got community ambulance person on his hat, and he wanders about with a pocket full of bandages. And if he sees someone lying there who's been hit by a car and then run over 3 others, he starts to bandage them. A bit like the community support officer. No proper training for the job. No ability beyond the walking about and wearing the hat. Nothing to offer in comparison to a fully qualified police officer. Well, the same with the wander-about fireman. He's got his bucket, he's got his water, which he can chuck at the fire. He's got his ladder and he's got his hat. He's not quite trained. He doesn't know how to deal with all the different chemicals. He hasn't got the apparatus that enables him to run into a burning building. He's not quite there. But at least he's wandering about, and you'll feel better, because every so often a bloke with a ladder and a bucket of water will go past your house and you'll think, well, that's all right, he's patrolling the street. If ever there's a fire, he's your man. Just like the police officer. Community support Bobby goes past and you think, well, that's all right, they're patrolling the street. He's not a copper, but he's there. He's there. The same with the fireman. And then, of course, the man with the bandages. He goes wandering by. He wanders by with a pocket full of bandages. Well, all right, I'm having an heart attack. Well, that's a bugger. I've not been trained for that. But don't worry, I've got a bandage. You cut something, I'll bandage the bugger. That's what we need.
With you on the phone.
Save a fortune.
228 2255. BBC Radio Manchester.
Alan in Manchester. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Alan, you okay?
I'm very well, yeah. I've just had a cracking idea. Go on.
No, I was just comment on when you went to Crete. I did the same thing last year.
Oh, did you?
I went to Suda Bay. That's the Allied one.
Yeah, yeah.
And I found it was very... how can I put it? It was a different atmosphere to the German one. The German one, I think it was Hill 107 or 108, I think it's called. And the Greek mile, or Greek kilometre, is about 5 times longer than the English one, because I set off at the bottom of the hill at Melanie, where the German cemetery is, and it took me about an hour and a half to get up to a kilometre. It was about 10. Yeah. My bottle of water didn't work. But what I found was when I went to the Allied one, it was very regimented and very, very British in the white crosses, and it's very respectful and very, oh yes, this is how it's done. We have to respect like this. But the German one I thought was different, because they're like little flags, aren't they, lie down, little baby flags lie down. Yeah. And it was a lot more subdued, but there was a lot more background information in the German one of why they were there. It had sort of, I wouldn't say an apology, but like a reason why they're here and a reason why they shouldn't be here again, sort of thing, a sort of an anti-war thing, which in the British one it didn't. which I thought was, you're going to remember people, remember them, but remember why they died. Because if you took a group of school kids there, like my kids went to didn't go to the German one, because I thought it was a bit of a trek for them, but they went to the Allied one, and they were just looking at what was there. They didn't have any background behind it. It was, you could go and sign the book, but there was just a load of white headstones just going to the cemetery. But the German one was, this is what happened, this is why they're there, this is why it shouldn't happen again, and this is what we're doing to stop it happening again. There was a little bit of a museum sort of thing there as well. And I thought it was a different atmosphere too. It was more subdued.
I guess if you are, and it's 60 odd years ago, but if you are the offending party and the loser, you're going to...
You'll be more humble, aren't you? Yeah, you're going to be more... I understand.
It's very, very difficult for the German people to remember their war dead. Very difficult, because of course there are an awful lot of people knocking about who will say, well, what right? A, you started it, and B, it was an evil.
Change it a little bit, but the same kind of thing. When you were in Crete, did you notice the little churches at the side of the road, the tiny little, like Wendy House churches? Did you see those? I did, yes. Now, do you know what those are for?
Aren't they for road traffic accidents?
I thought that at first.
Yes.
But I thought, bloody hell, there's a lot of family specs then. There's a lot of road traffic accidents on Crete. I read an actual book about it on the internet. Now, what some of these are for is where there was actually a killing or a massacre of people.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, it isn't just for road traffic accidents. It's for people. It's for the site of deaths, if you like.
Yeah. Now, some of these. I was on the internet and we were talking to a few people while we were over there, and they were saying that they remember people when it's the birthday. Or they always have a drink in there, like a shot of whiskey or whatever it is, raki or whatever it is, a bit of food and something else. They put in a little prayer or whatever, write a prayer out, and they put it in there, the candle, and they keep that maintained all the time, just to go back to monuments and things. But I was amazed how many there were, because they're everywhere. I thought,
yes, they are.
I thought, I'm not going on the road, I'm going to stay to the beach.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Good on you, mate. Cheers. Have a good day, Alan. Thank you very much. Staying on the beach. Good idea always. Yeah, right. It's just gone 1:30. Joan in Wigan says, mistakes happen. Don't think everyone who was hanged has been totally innocent. Why were they even a suspect? Well, because the police, like everybody else, are sometimes crap at their job, John. Sometimes. Not always, by any means. They usually do a very good job. But Stefan Kishko, why was he a suspect? Because he was a bit slow. That's why he was a suspect. Because he was a bit slow. Because he didn't meet the then police's description of normal. Oh, look at him, he's a weirdo. Let's get him. And then he confessed, because he was a bit slow. He was bullied into a confession. He hadn't done it. Nobody thinks he'd done it. And we've now got DNA evidence that proves he cannot have done it. It was not possible for him to have done it. I picked just one randomly. Well, not that random, but I pick one. There's no suspicion now that Stefan Kishko was the killer of that young lass. But he was convicted on his own testimony. Why did he plead guilty? Well, he didn't plead guilty, he pleaded not guilty, but why did he confess? He confessed because he was browbeaten into it by people of, should we say, stronger minds than his. And that's frankly unacceptable. It was always unacceptable, but to suggest that if you're a suspect, there's no smoke without fire. Good God, Joan, do you really think the police are infallible? They weren't then, and they aren't now. Some people believe God is the only person who is infallible. They are all wrong. I am the only person who is infallible. Lewis in Bolton. Alan, with regards to the death penalty, can I just make a couple of points? British governments have signed several treaties and agreements over the years with the United Nations, the European Union, etc. And it is laudable that they denounce capital punishment. However, How does any government reconcile that with the ability to invade countries and kill thousands of innocent people in the name of democracy, and at home sentence people to death on economical grounds when they require drugs to aid their recovery, and they are told they must die by the death lottery? Council called, ironically, nice. Well, all right, I'll put the... They're not sentenced to death by nice. That's not what's happening. Even in the case of Sutan and those other drugs, they've already got their death sentence. The only thing that the drugs can do is affect the date by a few months. And what NICE says, and you can disagree with them easily, but what NICE says is it's not worth £30,000-40,000 worth of national health money to extend your life by a month or two. It's just not worth it. It ain't going to cure you. You're going to die of this disease. All we're discussing is the date. Dave in Thailand, again, asks, if you're an atheist, what do you swear on in a Crown Court? You don't. You attest. You state in front of the judge and the jury that you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. What you don't do is call down the wrath of God should you get it wrong, should you lie. So you simply attest. That's what it's called. So it's one word, A-T-E-S-T. So you attest that you are telling the truth. The reason most people, the reason generally the Bible is used is because that is called taking an oath. It's a particular legal process. The Bible effectively has no merit. It is a prop. The Bible is just a prop. So the individual who's swearing the oath, whether it be in court or whether it be before a notary public or what have you, the person puts his or her hand on this prop called the Bible or some other religious tome, puts his hand on it and says, I promise to tell the truth. That's it. That's it. Well, if you're not a... it would be pointless for the likes of me, because the Bible, whilst it would only be a prop, I could just, as I say, as validly use Enid Blyton or some other novel, some other creation of the imagination of man. I could so very easily use that. And so you don't. You just use nothing. You stand there and you attest to the court. You can't swear, because swearing involves a religious tone. So you attest. You say, I promise this court that I will tell the truth. And that way, if you do not tell the truth, and you were found to have not told the truth, then you can be prosecuted for perjury in the same way, lying in court. In exactly the same way. So that's how it works. That's that. That's what you do. 0161228 2255. When witnesses and the accused do attest, judges often point out to the jury, or whoever, well, it would only ever be the jury if the judge is pointing it out, that it might well be less regard. They can take less regard than they do of an oath. I think the judges are wrong in that, but that's the way it is. Terry in Reddish, you promote lots of saving by employing community firefighters. It'll save us a fortune, you say. It was fill us with confidence to see a man in a don't-run-me-over jacket on the street with his ladder and bucket of water. Well, to save even more money, why don't we ask the window cleaners to take over the firefighters' job altogether? After all, they already have the necessary equipment. A ladder and a bucket of water. Indeed, some of them even have bikes. So you can see the money that would be saved on vehicles as well. Terry, you've fallen into the trap, mate. You've fallen into the trap. It's not a job for a window cleaner. A window cleaner is an honourable profession. Now, the window cleaner would not be patrolling the streets. He would visit streets. I mean, our window cleaner comes round. He's in the street for a couple of hours. 10 at a house. In the street, couple of hours, no problem. But of course he's not. At the time, he's up and down the ladder, doing the upstairs, doing the downstairs, doing round the back. He's not patrolling the street. The protection offered to the community by the community fire officers, firefighters, thus saving us thousands upon thousands upon thousands on the rates. The community firefighter, working for just above the minimum wage with a free hat, a free ladder and a free bucket, he or she could do it as well. They'd be patrolling the streets all the time. The ratio of patrol per pound would be higher if the individual, the community fire officer, the CFF, if the CFF was not engaged in other employment. You see my point? We don't want part-timers, dear God. Here's an idea, Alan. How about volunteer community radio presenters? Well, I'm bloody near that. Dear God, I'm not much further than a volunteer. Enthusiastic amateurs. Well, I'm not enthusiastic, who would host radio programmes in place of the regulars. Accepted, they may not be true professional performers, but as regards their polish and presenting ability compared to the incumbents, would we be able to tell any difference? Well, not at lunchtime, Brian, that's for sure. Certainly. But you wouldn't save any money. You get rid of me, you save almost nothing, frankly. Getting on for 20 to 2, BBC Radio Manchester News Headlines. Alexia O'Connor.
A Salford woman with terminal kidney cancer who's fighting for the NHS to treat her with the drug Suitant has taken her protest to London. Police in Warrington are hunting for 2 robbers who forced their way into a pensioner's flat at knife point on Sunday night. And the actor and singer Darren Day has been banned from driving for 18 months after pleading guilty to drink driving. He was also fined £700. Manchester's weather, cloudy, some showers and a high today of 20 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, traffic on the M56 is still struggling eastbound because of an accident just after junction 4 at Withenshaw. Matrix sign's been set to 30 miles per hour and the inside lane of the 4's closed off Manchester bound because of this collision involving 2 cars. Police and ambulance are in attendance at the scene. And on the M60, traffic's queuing on the exit slip at junction 3 at Kingsway, heading onto the A34 because of roadworks on Kingsway on the A34 as you come off the motorway. And on the M62, it's still fairly foggy, I'm afraid, between 21 Milne Row and 22 Rishworth Moor. Don't forget, if you're using the trains this week, services are being diverted via Wilmslow on cross country between Stafford and Manchester Piccadilly. That's due to engineering works on the track, so services are diverting via Wilmslow and won't call at Stoke or Macclesfield. Instead, a replacement coach will operate between Stafford and Stoke and between Macclesfield and Wilmslow. And if you're heading to London Euston from Manchester Piccadilly, be aware that about an hour will be added onto your journey because services are diverting via Birmingham for the moment until around about 7th of September. Don't forget, if you can update me further, call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Good afternoon. Well, the rain has once again got the better of Lancashire in the county championship, this time at Blackpool. Lancashire are due to take on Surrey at Stanley Park today, but play's been abandoned for the day following the lunchtime pitch inspection. Chris Malaban's there.
A total washout at Stanley Park on day 1, I'm afraid, as persistent rain prevents any play between Lancashire and Surrey. Inspecting at 1 o'clock, umpires Jeremy Lloyds and Nick Cook didn't take long to decide that the saturated outfield wouldn't dry in time for a start later in the afternoon. With Rockbottom Surrey the visitors, it's doubly frustrating for Stuart Law's men, but the history of recent championship matches here suggests that 3 days may yet be enough to see a result. Lancashire defeated Durham in just 2 last year. If the weather allows play tomorrow, then the Red Rose may yet still have time to try and secure a crucial win.
Thanks, Chris. We'll try again on day 2 tomorrow. Meanwhile, Pakistan and Sussex leg spinner Mushtaq Ahmed has retired from county cricket due to an ongoing knee injury. Mushtaq took 1,407 wickets in all competitions during his career. Manchester City have arrived in Denmark ahead of tomorrow's UEFA Cup qualifying tie with FC Midtjylland. City have a 1-goal deficit from the first leg at Eastlands, but Blues boss Mark Hughes feels the away leg will be a different story.
It's not an easy game. I think the difference now is that we've had 2 really competitive Premier League games, and we hadn't had that leading into the last game against Midtjylland. So yeah, they'll see a different team this Thursday.
Well, that game kicks off at 3:25 tomorrow. We'll have full commentary with Ian Cheeseman from 3 here on BBC Radio Manchester. Meanwhile, City defender Ryan McGiven has been included in Northern Ireland's 22-man squad for the World Cup qualifiers next month. The 18-year-old was sent off on his debut against Scotland last week. Some other football news this afternoon. Chelsea chief executive Peter Kenyon says they expect to sign Real Madrid's Robinho within the next 24 hours. Kaka has denied newspaper reports linking him with an £80 million move to Luis Felipe Scolari's side. The AC Milan midfielder, I should say, says he's staying at the San Siro. Blackburn have signed Australian international Vince Grella for an undisclosed fee from Torino. Sunderland have finally completed the signing of Anton Ferdinand from West Ham on a 4-year deal. Newcastle midfielder James Milner has handed in a transfer request at St James's Park. And Roman Pavlyuchenko is on the verge of a move to Tottenham. The Spartak Moscow striker is sorting out a visa. His arrival at White Hart Lane could well speed up the sale of Dimitar Berbatov to Manchester United. Well, Ryan Giggs thinks United can go on to dominate European football with the potential that's in the current squad. Tomorrow, the Reds find out their opposition in the group stages of this season's Champions League.
Hopefully it can get better, yeah. But the potential of this team is to go on and dominate football for the next 5-10 years. So I want to be part of that, obviously, at the start. So we've seen a glimpse of that last year. The test is now to go on and build on that.
Well, one of Greater Manchester's Olympic medalists says there's no certainty she'll be part of Team GB at London in 2012. Stockport swimmer Kerry-Anne Payne won silver in the 10-kilometre open water swim and says she's now focusing on getting gold in London.
Things can change, anything can happen in 4 years, and we've got a great youth scheme coming up for all the youngsters that, hopefully want to be in 2012 as well. So, our place is never sort of set in stone until we kind of get there.
Well, you might think that all Olympians are on strict regimes when it comes to diet. That's not the case with Bolton's Olympic gold medalist Jason Kenny. Kenny says as long as he gets plenty of food, that's all that matters, but can't keep up with teammate Chris Hoy.
I just eat plenty, and that's the key. But I'm not the kind of person that puts a lot of weight on easily, so I have to work quite hard to maintain my weight. So, yeah, I don't have any set rules or I eat certain things. I just eat plenty of good food, good wholesome food. I don't eat as much as Chris. Chris puts a lot of food away compared to me.
Well, Britain's Olympic boxing champion James DeGale says he'll take the next few weeks to consider his future. He's been made a number of offers to turn professional, but says a prospect of defending his title at the 2012 Games is a big attraction. Colin Montgomery says Ian Poulter's decision not to play in the Johnny Walker Classic has caused surprise among his fellow golfers on the European Tour. Poulter now needs a wildcard invite from captain Nick Faldo to make Europe's White Ryder Cup team.
It's the talk of the range that why he's suddenly pulled out of here if he knew that he had to play 15 tournaments in America. The question now is, well, why did he enter and then have to pull out, knowing he had to play 15 anyway in America? So that was a strange one. It'll all be revealed, I suppose, as to his decision, if it was a wise one or not, on Sunday evening.
And finally, tonight in Speedway, Bellevue Aces are at home against Wolverhampton.
I like that Robinho. Very good. Man, you prefer him to.
The next live action on the Northwest's biggest sports station.
Well, Bolton felt the bite of the underdog at the Reebok in the Carling Cup. Macclesfield are going giant hunting this evening. The Silkmen take on West Ham at Upton Park. Live updates tonight from 7:45.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Walter in Romilly says there are 2 T's in a test. No, there aren't. There are 3.
Your Sunday morning lie-in with Mike Shaft.
Now, this week we want to officially welcome the new Bishop of Stockport. What are your first impressions of this area?
People are immensely warm and welcoming. They've actually got time for you to engage with you, and that's what I really like. There's a much more stronger sense of community, and that's something that I really want to build on.
Mike Shaft.
Describe the Greenbelt Festival to somebody who's never been there and has never heard of it.
It's not an in-your-face religious festival. It's a festival of lots of activities where people of faith might go.
Manchester's faith, spirit and life's difficult questions with Mike Shaft.
8 out of 10.
Sunday morning from 7 on BBC Radio Manchester.
Christine in Warrington says the death penalty has never been a deterrent. In the 18th and 19th centuries, jails were so overcrowded they sent convicts to America and Australia. There were gangs, there were no-go areas. Never really did it. Alan, you infallible? No. You jest. Thank you. And he says you affirm, not a test in court. is right, you know, you test when you're swearing. Never mind. Alan, a noddy Bobby does the work of getting to know the local community and passing on valuable information to the police. Surely this doesn't require a high level of professionalism? Ian, in Northwich. He's dead keen on his noddy Bobby, isn't he? Well, all of that is true, but they're paying good money to a bloke or a woman to wander about talking to locals to get information, then give it a copper. Why don't they just have enough coppers, which is what they used to do? Mike in Liverpool. Hiya, Mike.
All right, Alan. I was just going to pick you up on the affirm thing, but I won't now.
Somebody beat you to it. Yeah. It's got 2 F's as well as 2 T's. Go on.
It's just that, you know, with all the talk about the death penalty and war and whatever, it just astounds me that people think the answer to life's problem is to kill people. And in the paper they saw over the weekend, the supplement, some guy, apparently he's a British Apache helicopter pilot, has been promoting his book, has been serialised in a couple of the papers, and it reads something like, I don't know, a comic, you know, in as much, and he was describing one. I saw a couple of battles there, and it offended me just to read it, but there was one, I was reading one this morning, it must have been another excerpt from it, and it was saying that it was a mission that they were going to sort out a bunch of Taliban. And the way they described it was just the relish there. It was this, and the detachment of what he was doing. It was almost like he was playing a video game. And he gave the tally at the end of the engagement of what he'd fired. And apparently he'd done either 12 or 13 of these Hellfire missiles. And they broke it down as 80,000 quid a piece. You know, we're working that out. That's 1,040,000 for the engagement, and apparently they killed 130 people. That works out roughly about £100,000 per life, and that's not including all the rest of the munitions. And it's also the another statistical reading. It takes about 125,000 bullets to kill one Taliban. He must be in hell of a state by the time you finish with him.
Must be like a pincushion. I mean, I've often done that mathematical equation in my head and thought, if instead of spending money on, we call it defence, don't we? But we all know what we mean.
Well, it's when they changed it from the Department
of
War.
The War Department, yeah. So instead of spending money on all that, if we actually gave that money to the variety of foreign people who perhaps might want to harm us, their desire to harm us might diminish substantially.
That's it. You see, the thing is, what it is, it's demonising people. Now, I know what the way, as you were saying before, it's a failure of politicians and leaders, all wrapped up with religion and tradition. I hate that word, tradition. But it just perpetuates everything, you know. Because we've done it this way in the past, this is the way we should act in the future. And that works right down the line, by the way, to all the daft things that happen on strike nights, etc. Anyway,
come a long way from capital punishment, the killing of foreign nationals, to stag nights, but I can see the parallel. I can see the line. Sadly.
But the thing is, the other thing is, people want one-stop solutions to life's problems, don't they? You know, and if somebody and if you don't like what they do, and they're really, really bad people, let's kill them. You know, if the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Indeed, it is.
You know, and if war was so good and so clever, and it sorts all the problems out, why are we still doing it?
But that's because, I mean, those that would defend war, it's very difficult. It's the old argument, if locks worked, no one would get robbed. But people do, so why bother locking the door?
That's another favourite one of mine, is as people perpetuating traditional thoughts. You know, in the old days, which when we say the old days, we're talking about 50 years ago generally, people didn't lock the doors, but every door had a lock on it.
Every door had a lock on it, probably, and nobody had anything worth stealing.
Exactly, but but people went down and went to Australia as criminals. A big part. I'm very interested in this stuff. A big part of they used to call it larceny in the old days.
They did.
Was stealing clothes.
Yeah.
But not stealing just clothes, stealing rags. And people went to Australia for that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you say you're very interested in it, so you won't mind the diversion, but people weren't sent to Australia by way of deterring others from crime. That was never the objective. People were sent to Australia because they couldn't get people to go to Australia voluntarily. They wanted Australia populating, and so they sent the baddies, because they're the only people they could get to send.
True, but what I'm talking about is the spirit of the age. It was the spirit of the age where people regularly birched people, for example, and hung people, innocent people. I mean, I've read an account of a 7-year-old kid who got birched, you know, with his backside running with blood when he came back home. It's just absolutely horrifying. But it's not the fact that there's always this confusion about people being sent to Australia for the colonies to do it. But it was a simple solution, wasn't it? Anyway, ship them all out, and they're definitely, it's the same sort of thing. They're out of the way. They're over there. They're not going to be coming back. It's a solution similar to hanging. You know, if the guy's dead,
but the problem is that, but your problem as a society is that you don't actually have a lot of time to give to addressing the problems that society faces. And correct. I don't know how you get to a position where you sit down, counsel wisdom, when, in fact, you have to satisfy the lust for something in a democracy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what we do is when we give our authority to the authorities to act on our behalf, is that we expect a natural justice to follow, and if that natural justice isn't satisfied, then people start bitching. You know, people. We used to do hanging. That's like people are messy, and they want one-stop solution, but because they're messy, there'll always be messy solutions. Yes, you're right. There isn't a simple answer. But what for my point is if we're talking, we're not killing people, and killing people is just so obnoxious. And I don't know how any other way to describe it.
I mean, I take your point about killing people is obnoxious, but there are people who have forfeited the right to live.
Correct.
Of that, there's no question. Now, once you've got to that stage, they've forfeited the right to live. You then, as a society, have to decide what you're going to do about those people who have forfeited the right to live. Now, personally, I believe you immediately incarcerate them and you start the process of them regaining the right to live. And many of them, Ian Brady's a classic case, won't make it before life takes its course and they die. But that has to be the objective. But it's very hard to sell that, because the other function of the judicial system is for society to take its revenge, and there is no revenge in counselling into a better place.
Exactly. I mean, I've got a couple of young kids, and the thought of anything happening to them by the hand of some maniac freaks me out. I mean, I am, in a lot of respects, liberal in my outlook and my until it happens to me.
That's the case for many.
I freely acknowledge that, but nonetheless, I'd like to think that I would behave in a more civilised fashion, so long as my sense of natural justice was being addressed. You know, in as much as I mean, what would tip it over the edge if there's somebody done something like that and started smirking? You know, that probably would be right, and you know, the lines have been well crossed by then. But nonetheless, it does behove us as a society to seek solutions that don't involve killing people.
All right, mate. Good on you, Mike. Thank you very much indeed. A couple of texts. What a good idea, Alan. This is the idea of we first of all have the... instead of doing it, we do away with half the firefighters, like we've done with the coppers. We get rid of half the coppers, we introduce the noddy bobbies. We get rid of half the firefighters, and we have a load of untrained people in a coat with shiny buttons and a funny hat, carrying a ladder and a bucket of water about. And also we get rid of all the ambulance, or a lot of the ambulance personnel, certainly the paramedics. What we're doing with doctors with blue heads. So we get rid of them, and we just get a bloke to walk around with bandages in his pocket. It strikes me as being eminently sensible. sensible, or at least as sensible as the Nobby Bobbies. And Russ in Lee agrees too. He's even come up with a name for them. What a good idea. We could call them Community Rescue Ambulance Persons. CARP. That's very good. We like that. And also, of course, if you don't like that because it's a bit offensive, then Russ offers an alternative. The Fire and Rescue Trainees. Or, for short, FART. Which strikes me as being absolutely fabulous. We used to have a French teacher called Mr. Hart. He was very good. We liked him. Unfortunately, his parents didn't like him because when he was born, and they knew at the time that his name was Hart. And frankly, they should have thought it through. Parents are sometimes very, very clumsy. But Mr. Hart, our French teacher, who incidentally used to drive a blue Jaguar. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. And he had an interesting moustache, but his parents hated him. They called him Alfred. We called him Alfart. See you tomorrow.
This Friday from 7, BBC Radio Manchester is the only place